As you become more familiar with the tools, there are multiple ways that you can approach a project. I am going to show you two different methods inside this video, and you can decide which method you like the best. Okay, we all are going to start with a new artboard, and it's going to be in inches, and it's going to be 11 by 8.5. It's 300 CMYK. We need to make a background, so I'm going to choose to use my pen tool. You could choose to use your shapes, your paintbrush. It's really up to you how you want to execute this. You could put pattern. You don't have to have just solid colors, but I am going to go ahead with my pen tool, and as you learned, I'm going to set it for shape. My fill's going to be on, but I'm not going to add a stroke. I don't want an outline. All right, I need to make a new layer, and I'm going to change my color. The reason why I made a new layer right now was because if I don't, it is going to change my old shape to pink. So I need to like reset it so I can make something separate. Okay, you can decide to make your background filled with patterns, so I could clip mask patterns into these triangles if I wanted to. You can leave them solid colors, it's really up to you. And you can move these around. Okay. Now, I do want to put these into a folder. So what I did was I clicked on the top one, clicked on the bottom one, holding Shift, and selected all three of them. So I'm going to go ahead and put them into a group, and I'm going to call this background. Now, if you were to add patterns and images, actually just pattern, you would see more inside this folder. But for me, I'm just going to stick with this. Now we're going to bring in your sketch. Your sketch should be downloaded from Canvas. I emailed it to you. And for me, my sketch is on a different computer, so I'm going to snag it from this file and carry it over. I grabbed the wrong layer, so I'm going to make sure that I grab my sketch. Here we go. All right, and place it down. Great. Now, this is where you have to make a decision. Do you want to use the pen tool and do shapes, or do you want to use the selection tool and use a paint bucket or a paintbrush? It's really entirely up to you. Each one is going to take time. One is not harder than the other. I personally think the pen tool gives off a nice edge. That's what I chose to use for mine. Let me turn these on for you. So you can see it gives off a nice clean, kind of almost vector style edge when you use the pen tool. But again, you can choose to paint this by hand. A lot of you are really good at painting on the computer. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you the pen technique first, and then I'll show you how to work with the paintbrush or the paint bucket. So number one thing when we are working on this is please make sure that all your panels have a folder. There is so much going on in each of these folders that if I did not have them, my layer panel would be an absolute disaster. So make sure that you have each panel with a new folder. Remember, that's this down here, and it's titled. And you on your sketch should have numbers on these panels to identify what they are. So that'll help too. So what I did was, for this first panel, is I just took my pen tool, I actually turned my fill off as I was drawing originally, and I did a stroke. Notice my stroke is set at 12.85 throughout the entire project, because I want to keep that consistent black line. You don't have to make it that big, you don't have to make it that small, it's all entirely up to you. So I would turn off my fill, I would turn on a black stroke, okay, and you might not want that color, but I chose that because I like the bold contrast. And then I just started to trace it. Now, underneath this shape, I had circles, and when I had done the shape and filled it in with color, I couldn't see them. So what you can do is you can turn off that part, and you could start building layers above it. Or you can even turn the opacity down so that you can see under it. It's up to you. Okay, so, and then the nice thing is you just come up here, close your panel, and move on to the next one. There is some clip masking going on in some of these. So you can see that I clip moused these eyeballs into the panel. The other thing to remember, and you've had some experience with this with the pen tool, is that you might have to go over part of the area, fill it in color, and then finish off with the objects on top. So what I mean by that is I made this blue before I did my shoelaces. So you can see I went over the shoelaces and I had to turn off that panel while I did my shoelaces. Okay, so it's a matter of order. Okay, if we're tackling this with the selection tool and we use a paint bucket or a paintbrush, you could very easily just come in here and paint if you're really good at staying in the lines. But what I would suggest to you is you do use the quick selection to kind of give yourself a closed in area. So first things first, we're going to make an adjustment of brightness and contrast. And again, this is if you're using the quick selection tool and you want to try using the paintbrush or the paint bucket. You're going to decrease your brightness, increase your contrast, and you're going to have to clip mask this into your sketch. So I'm just going to go here and clip mask it. Now, I'm going to start now by working with my first panel, and I'm going to grab a folder and I'm going to title it. So we're going to title this Panel 1, and I'm going to select this section from the shoe, but I can't select it unless I'm in this sketch layer. So I'm going to grab my quick selection, and I'm going to then come in here and drag my selection across. Now, the computer did a fairly good job, but the problem is these edges are really jaggedy and they're not very clean. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to my select and modify, and I'm just going to expand my selection. The number you choose kind of depends on your preference. Okay, and I can see it's still not completely smooth. So if I was to fill this in right now, it wouldn't look very good. Okay, and you are going to have to, if you choose this method, you're going to have to sit here with your plus and minus and kind of get the right selection here. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and copy. So Command. Oh, sorry, I forgot to do something else. Let's go to select and modify and smooth. I'm going to smooth it at 10. And I would do that for each selection that you make. Stick with that number 10 because you can see right now how much nicer it turned out. Okay, now Command C, Command V. So I'm taking this selection I just made and putting it into Panel 1. And I'm going to turn on this little box. It's actually a lock. And what that's going to allow me to do is use my paintbrush to only paint in that area that I just selected. Okay, and you can also add that stroke that you want. Okay, so you can see the edges are not going to be as pretty as if you use the pen tool. Okay. Okay, so once you're done with your shoe, you're going to make sure your sketch is turned off, and I'm going to go ahead and I would export this and turn this in, and then you're done.